In the far north, the year has two moods: the long day when the sun does not leave, and the long night when it barely remembers to return. Between them, the sea breathes under ice, and the people breathe because the sea allows it. They call the waters Sedna before they call it by any other name, because the old stories say a girl went into the deep and became its keeper. This is not a story about a gentle ocean. It is about hunger and fear, and a father who chose the easy cowardice over his daughter's hands. It is about why the harpoon must ask permission, and why the shaman beats the drum toward the bottom, and why every hunter who lives on ice learns sooner or later that the surface is only a lid. They say when Sedna is angry, the dogs howl without reason, and the meat spoils in the cache. They say when she has listened to the seal comes near the hole in the ice, and the child learns to sow fur before the child learns to fear the dark. The story is not only about the past. It is about every winter that has happened since. In the old Inuit tellings, her name is Sedna. In the old tellings, she was human once. This is how the human part ended. Sedna lived with her father in a winter camp where the dogs were never fat and the meat rack was often empty. She was young and quick and did not yet fear the dark water, because fear is taught by elders and she had only begun to listen. Men came sometimes to speak with her father about trade and marriage. One visitor was not a man as men are. He wore a fine parka of feathers. His eyes were bright and sideways like a bird's. He promised meat without end, and a house where the wind did not bite. Her father heard meat and agreed. Sedna heard the wind and the feathers and did not agree. But in those camps, a daughter's no is a quiet thing next to a father's yes. She went with the stranger to his cliff nest. The promised meat was fish stolen from other hunters. The house was cold stone that smelled of guano and old screaming. He fed her, but he fed her as a captor feeds, not as a husband shares. When she wept, he called it the noise of a spoiled child. When she refused him, he called it the mood of the shore. She learned that some marriages are only another name for being trapped in the open air. When her father came again, it was not from love at first. It was because the bird husband had boasted, and boasting reaches other ears, and her father understood at last that he had traded his daughter for lies. He came in his kayak when the stranger was away hunting stolen fish. He said, "Climb in, we go home." She did not ask if home would be safer. She climbed. The bird returned as they pushed off. His wings beat the water until spray hid the sky. He shrieked that what was given was given. Sedna's father paddled harder than he had ever paddled for his own life. The cliff shrank. The open ice widened. For a moment, she believed the old camp could still exist, that a door could close on the nest and the story could become a bad season instead of a life. Then the sky answered the bird. Some tellings say storm. Some say the spirit called fog. In every telling, the father felt the water rise and his courage break at the same instant, the way ice breaks when the current moves underneath. The kayak rocked in a sea that had turned black. Sedna sat low in the stern, her fingers white on the rim. Her father looked at the waves climbing and looked at her and made the calculation cowards make when they believe the world will forgive them if they are only fast enough. He did not say, "Forgive me." He only began to beat the water with his paddle as if the sea were an enemy he could outrun. The bird was a speck behind them, then a cry, then nothing but weather. Sedna said, "You are afraid of the wrong thing." He said, "Hold on." She held on. The cold came up through the wood into her bones. The spray froze in her hair. She thought of the nest and the stolen fish and her father's yes, and she held on because holding on was still the only language she had. When the kayak tipped, she went into the water with her hands first, as people do when they are not ready to die. The sea was not warm. The sea was not cruel in words. It only received her weight and pulled. Her father did not dive after her. He leaned over the side and saw her hands on the kayak edge and saw the sea take her wrists, and he took up his knife. Some tellings say he meant only to free the boat. Some say he meant to free himself. In every telling, the result is the same. He cut off her fingers where they gripped the wood. She had trusted those fingers. They had sewn and held a bowl and covered her mouth when the bird screamed. Now they were questions the sea answered. The first finger fell and the sea made a seal from it. She screamed under the water and still would not let go. He cut the second, and the sea made another creature. Each time she lost a piece of herself, the water brightened with life that was not mercy. Her thumb went last. Her hand went. She sank without hands to climb back. The kayak righted. Her father paddled away and did not look down again, because looking down would have required a kind of bravery he had already spent. Behind him, the ice closed its face. Below him, his daughter closed her eyes and kept sinking, and the sea did not return her to the air. Down she went through green that became blue, that became black, that became a place without sun. Pain left her slowly, not because the deep was kind, but because bodies learn to stop arguing when the argument is lost. Her hair spread like weed. Her stumps healed into something the water could use. She was not a girl in a parka anymore. She was a woman made of current and memory. At the bottom, she sat on a shelf of stone that had never seen a campfire. Fish passed her face without fear. The old bird cry could not reach here. Her father's paddle stroke could not reach here. For the first time since the feathered marriage, she was alone without being owned. Lonely is not the same as empty. The deep was full of listening. She listened until listening became power, and power became law. When she opened her mouth, the water moved. When she closed her mouth, the ice above cracked in its sleep. That is when the people began to call the sea Sedna, whether they knew the story or not. The seals remember her wrists. The walrus remember her knuckles. The whale remembers the whole hand she lost when she still wanted the surface. They circle her throne of cold stone not as pets but as proofs, living evidence that betrayal can also be creation if the betrayed survive long enough to become law. Hunters on the ice dream of her when they take too much. Shamans beat drums to plead with her hair, because her hair tangles the harpoons and the boats and the minds of men who think the sea is only water. She does not hate every hunter. She hates the careless. She hates the proud. She hates the father in every man who would cut a hand to save a boat. When the meat rack is full, it is because someone asked. When the rack is empty, it is because someone forgot. The North does not argue about fairness. It argues about memory. Her father died on the ice in some tellings. In others, he lived and grew old and never spoke her name. The camp moved. Children were born who learned the rule before they learned her face. Sedna did not return to the kayak. She did not forgive in the soft way stories sometimes ask. She became the place where forgiveness must be negotiated with drum and restraint and the humility of cold. If you remember anything, remember the hands on the gunwale. Remember the knife. Remember that the sea is not empty when it takes you. It appoints. Remember that every finger lost became something the people still eat, still sew, still sing about in winter, and that the song is not only beauty, it is also a warning dressed as myth. This was Forgotten Fables. This was Sedna. Follow the channel when you want the next country, the next age, the next story the loud world forgot.